How many of you have ever heard of a QACVR? Well, I imagine if you're in the aviation industry, you may be familiar with this acronym. But if you're like me, you probably aren't familiar with this piece of technology at all. At least not yet, anyway. But the QACVR is a hell of an invention, and it's even been recommended on American aircraft. But the pilots' unions are worried about privacy concerns, and they're probably right to be. But QACVR stands for Quick Access Cockpit Voice Recorder, and it was developed at the request of the Chinese government by Aviation Systems and Donica Electronics in China. QACVR is an onboard device that records cockpit voice activity for up to 3,000 hours at a time. It can easily access and store cockpit audio information with synchronized clock information. And once the aircraft has landed, it can quickly play back and export audio data to provide timely and reliable support for flight management. In 2018, the CAAC, the Civil Aviation Administration in China, required all aircraft in China to be equipped with this technology. But here's the interesting part, as if it wasn't interesting enough already. Not only can this information be downloaded when the aircraft lands, but many Chinese pilots, anonymous sources, and aviation experts in China say they've seen this device operate with real-time air-to-ground transmission capability. And that is the real reason it was ordered by China and invented in the first place. Mostly to monitor and listen for any anti-government speech or activity in the cockpit of the state-run commercial airlines. So the rumors and stories that we've heard that authorities in China may have in fact heard the entire crash as it happened live, most likely are not rumors at all but fact. So then why did China only send the black boxes to Washington and not the QACVCR? And where is the QACVCR or its SIM card now? Well, that's a great question. Oh, and that whole first officer did it by himself story. Did that really happen, or is that a little too convenient to be true? Well, we're going to talk about it next on Maximus. Greetings everybody, Maximus here. So these are the facts. Fact number 1. On March 21, 2022 at 6:20 p.m. UTC, a China Eastern Airlines Boeing 737 Flight 5735 was cruising normally at 29,100 feet when suddenly and without warning, the Boeing 737-800 plunged in a vertical dive and crashed in the hills of Guangxi in China. There were no survivors. Fact number 2. The two black boxes were found on March 23rd and 27th respectively, but in severely damaged condition, and were eventually sent from China to the US with the hopes that they could be deciphered. But it seems the cockpit voice recorder was damaged beyond repair. But no other recording devices such as the QAVCR was sent to the US by China. Fact number 3. The crew. The chief pilot in charge of Flight 5735 was 32-year-old Captain Yang Hongda, a Boeing 737 pilot since January of 2018, with 6,700 flight hours. The first officer was 59-year-old five-star Captain Zhang Zhengping and was one of the most experienced commercial pilots in all of China, as well as China Eastern's most decorated pilot and chief flight instructor for the airline. Coincidentally, First Officer Zhang Ping previously trained the younger captain of Flight 5735 Yang Hongda. Also on the flight deck that day was 27-year-old observer and second officer Ni Gongtao with a total of 556 flight hours and was on board to fulfill part of his training obligation. Fact number 4. The aircraft was a Boeing 737-800, serial number 41474, line number 5453, and was 6.8 years old. The aircraft was delivered to China Eastern Airlines in June of 2015. This aircraft was well maintained and had an exemplary safety record. Those are the facts, and that's all the world still officially knows as of the time I'm writing this, which is 12:11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, November 3rd, 2022. As for the rest of the video, we're going to talk about what we don't know, mostly rumors and speculation which may or may not be actual facts. In my last video on the subject that centered around China's extreme anger over a Wall Street Journal leak from the NTSB that stated this crash was no accident, and the information from the flight data recorder points to intentional inputs into the aircraft that caused the crash, meaning one of the pilots put the plane in a nosedive intentionally. However, as a result of China's anger over the leak and international aviation laws, the only country that can release information on commercial plane crashes is the country where the crash took place, and that of course is China. And good luck getting that information from China. So in a nutshell, the prevailing theory goes that the highly decorated, extremely experienced, but recently demoted first officer on the flight, Senior Captain Zhang Zhengping, intentionally downed the plane as a result of being demoted by China Eastern Airlines and losing his life savings when his investments in the property giant China Evergrande went belly up. They say Zhang even left a note that can be seen in places on the internet but nowhere else. However, former friends and colleagues of Zhang Zhengping say this note doesn't look like something written by a person in the industry. They even call it shoddy and hard to believe. Some rumors on Reddit even say the control tower heard the entire fight in the cockpit as it happened. But that's not true because we have the cockpit recordings from the control tower and they were never able to establish contact with Flight 5735. Okay, but for the sake of argument, let's say it's all true. Zhang Zhengping did it all by himself. But how could he simply just push the yoke forward and the other two pilots do nothing to intervene or stop him? After all, we're talking about a 59-year-old man against two younger, stronger men half his age. So how did he pull it off alone? Stands to reason he would have needed at least an accomplice or two. Or worse, if he did do it alone, he would have had to incapacitate the other two pilots with a weapon of some sort. Did he smuggle a weapon on the flight and take out the other two pilots first? Still, that would be a hell of a fight in a small space. But still, it's 2 against 1. So he either needed help from one of the pilots on the flight deck or he would have had to have help in the back of the plane. However, once locked, the cockpit door can only be opened from the flight deck or by a code known only by the pilots. So Zhang would have had to let them in or give his accomplices the secret code. But still, there were 2 other pilots to deal with, unless they were already dead at the hand of Zhang. But still, if there was trouble in the cockpit, there is a secret code on the plane's transponder one of the pilots could have activated. That code is 7500. That would send out a signal that the plane was being hijacked or they were in trouble. But no such code was ever sent. If you recall the similar case of the Germanwings flight where there were only 2 pilots on the flight deck. When the captain got up to use the restroom, the co-pilot locked the door and locked the captain out of the cockpit so he was unable to return. The co-pilot was able to successfully crash the plane in the Alps. However, in the case of Flight 5735, we know for a fact that someone in the cockpit regained control of the aircraft, for a moment at least, because after 20 seconds into the 400-mile-per-hour dive, the rate of descent suddenly slowed. The dive was further arrested over the next 45 seconds until the plane leveled off at 7,425 feet above the ground. It then began climbing about 15 seconds later. At 8,600 feet, the plane went into a second dive. Then about 30 seconds later, the plane crashed into the ground. So that suggests that maybe even though they haven't found evidence of it yet, there still could have been a catastrophic event that happened to the 737 and not intentional pilot inputs that caused the crash. However, the US NTSB is quite certain that Flight 5735 was intentionally downed. And that brings us back to how I started the video with the Chinese installed QAACVR, the quick access to cockpit voice recorder on Flight 5735 that seems to have disappeared. Because usually within every rumor, no matter how far-fetched, there is always a kernel of truth. And we know for a fact the control tower never heard what went on in that cockpit because we have the recordings. But what we don't know is if the Chinese government heard exactly what happened in the cockpit with the QACVR, which China had ordered to be installed on all commercial aircraft back in 2018. And whether Zhang acted alone or had help in downing Flight 5735, or if it was hijacked by another completely separate faction, if that news ever got out. Because of course, in China's mind, that kind of information would make China look weak, and it would reflect terribly on the Chinese aviation system, especially in a post-9/11 world. So if I had to wager a guess, yeah, it was probably intentionally done, but I can't say with any certainty by whom or what. But I'm guessing if the rumors in the Chinese aviation community that this QACVR sends back real-time data to the Chinese Civil Aviation Administration, the Chinese government probably already knows what happened, and it probably would cause great embarrassment for China. But all I really know is that I really don't know anything. I just put together the facts for you to think about and consider and decide for yourself. No, this isn't a Maximus conspiracy theory. The technology is real and is backed up by Chinese aviation law. The only question is, does China already know exactly what happened on board Flight 5735? But only time will tell. Or maybe we'll never know, because China will never tell. Well, that's all I have for now. The rest is up to you. I'm looking forward to reading thousands of comments, so get to work and let me know down below. Until next time, if you think I deserve it, please consider subscribing. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and ring the bell. And remember, leave the rubber on the runway and your troubles on the ground. And I will see you next time in the air. Yeah, this is Maximus.